And welcome back to Consumer Choice Radio, broadcasting here on the Big Talker 106.7 FM and Saga 960 AM in the Peel region of Ontario, Canada. We're very happy and proud to have our next guest, a repeat guest, friend of the show. We're speaking with Bartley J. Madden. He retired as the managing director of Credit Suisse Holt after a career in investment research and money management. And you can see him and now all over the internet and publishing all about free-to-choose medicine. Bart, I know we mentioned that before, but it's a pleasure to talk to you again. Thanks for coming on the program.
Great to be here.
So I want to point our listeners over to an article over on fee.org that you put together last month. Promising new legislation could transform the FDA's drug approval process, leading to better treatments and lower prices. We all have had a sort of elementary education on the FDA and their drug process and experimental approvals and everything through COVID. But tell us about this promising legislation and how you think it merges with some of the ideas that you have been promoting over several years.
Sure. For almost 20 years, I've been writing about free-to-choose medicine. And there's a book out there, Free to Choose Medicine, Better Drugs Sooner at Lower Cost. And the idea here is that the FDA, the status quo FDA currently, it stifles innovation. It results in sky-high prescription drug prices. And that should be no surprise. It takes a drug developer 10 years, and when you add up all the costs, it's over $2 billion to get the drug approved. And the other fundamental problem with the FDA is that it denies freedom of choice. So that if you're dealing with a serious illness, even a life-threatening illness, you should be free to make a choice advised by your doctor to be able to access a not yet approved drug that's demonstrated safety and efficacy. So those are the fundamental problems with the FDA. And Free to Choose Medicine, actually, an early booklet was distributed in Japan. And Japan, their version of the FDA and the politicians agreed to make eminent common sense. So they passed a version of Free to Choose Medicine called conditional approval for regenerative medicine drugs. Now, while I've been making this intellectual argument, Dr. Al Masella, for the last 2 decades, he's been working with brain tumor patients. The Masella Foundation for Brain Tumor Research and Information has been a godsend for patients, especially younger patients with brain tumors. Now, in all of Al's work, he has essentially coincided with what I've been preaching, and Al was instrumental in the introduction of the Promising Pathway Act, and it is revolutionary. It could change how medicine is practiced worldwide. It is a very big deal.
And in regards to the FDA, I would love your take on the concept of reciprocal approval. So the idea that once a drug is approved in a comparable country by a similar regulator, let's say Public Health England or Health Canada, many have argued that there should just be one threshold. So if you've gotten approval in the EU, you shouldn't have to go through all of the hoops again in the US with the FDA, and that would really streamline things. Do you think that would help in terms of pricing and access and innovation, or is it not enough? Do things need to go maybe a little further?
Right. The Reciprocity was originally promoted by my friend Alex Tabarrok at George Mason University. It's a very solid idea. And what was appealing about it is that it could potentially be quickly implemented. Now, you asked, does it go the full 9 yards? No, that the Promising Pathway Act is a structural change to the FDA. And here are the key elements. After a drug has passed safety and generated some efficacy, then it could be granted provisional approval. Now you're talking about accessing a drug 5 to 7 years earlier than the status quo. And that provisional approval is for 2 years. And if the drug demonstrates that it works, good results, it can get another 2-year window up to 6 years. Now, if during that 6-year period, the real world data with patients shows that this drug obviously benefits patients significantly, then the FDA could give it conventional approval. Okay, so a key thing in the Promising Pathway Act is a registry, a database that includes all of the treatment results for the clinical trials. With that database, then you and your doctor would be able to make an informed decision. Do you use an approved drug, or is a provisional drug the best option, for you? Now, over the years, I mentioned Al Musella, who's working with brain tumor patients. He's developed the preeminent database. Even the FDA agrees this is the best database in the world for brain tumor patients. And he's got over 30 experts. So a patient with a brain tumor can go to his foundation and get, here are the most promising treatments based on all of the data and the experts analyzing it. Now, invariably, the most promising treatments are not yet approved drugs. So that's where you see the compelling need for the Promising Pathway Act.
You're listening to Consumer Choice Radio. We're speaking with Bartley Madden, is the author of Free to Choose Medicine, Better Drugs Sooner at Lower Cost. Bart, I have a question now that we had you on the program fairly early on in the pandemic. Talked a little bit about the different vaccine treatments and how those things have gone through the FDA. Knowing what we know now, we're in July 2021. There's still a lot of people that need to be vaccinated across the world. A lot of countries that need to get access. In our own country, in the U.S., at least, it's gone very quickly. The question I have is, what do you think the average person can take from the kind of FDA approval process? Is there a lot of things to praise and how quickly things were done? Is the emergency authorization, was that the best path to take? Because as far as we know for this moment, they're still not officially approved after all this time, after hundreds of millions of people have taken these shots around the world. What do you think should be our kind of perspective on that?
I think a useful perspective is a contrast. Most people do not understand how the FDA operates. And so that if you think of 10 years, typically from the beginning to when a drug is approved, that's a decade. Now what we see with these vaccines, it's an incredibly fast pace relative to the 10-year period. So that people should wake up as to the enormous potential gains to health by restructuring the FDA. Now, earlier I talked about this registry at the Musella Foundation, which could be duplicated, countrywide with this FDA reform. And so what you have is you have fast-paced learning and sharing of data. And let's just say there are 2 drugs that show they're safe and they show modest efficacy. But doctors experiment, and by combining those 2 drugs, you get an incredibly good, outcome. So the ability to be able to have doctors experiment and use their judgment, and then post the treatment results. One gigantic benefit would be the identification of subsets of patients, so that say you have a life-threatening disease. Now there's a provisional drug out there, and you're able to access this registry of information, and you can see that based on patients' genetic makeup, there's a subgroup of patients who do phenomenally well. First thing you want to do is ask your doctor, do I fit that subgroup? So the idea of having this freedom of choice, fast-paced learning, sharing of data, this is a pathway to really get the subtitle of my book, Better Drugs Sooner at Lower Cost. Now, the lower cost, we hear so much stuff from the politicians about lowering prescription drug prices. Now, it's in terms of economic insights, it's totally empty stuff. Here's how you really could get a radical drop in drug prices. Let's imagine a different world. The Promising Pathway Act is passed. Okay, provisional drugs are able to get out there, and a drug developer can charge a fee for it. Now, compared to the status quo, the drug developer has saved 90 to 95% of the cost of conventional drug approval. Just think about that, 90 to 95%. And you don't wait 8 to 10 years, the drug developer can be selling that drug, if it's safe and generates initial efficacy, within 3 years. Okay, now what's going to happen? More and more drug developers, especially smaller ones with financial constraints, will get in the game. You'll have heightened competition, radically lower drug developmental costs. That equals radical drop in drug prices. And that logic is economically sound. It would work.
I mean, yeah, that's something that's when Yael and I have conversations with folks, and I'm sure you see this. You come to opposition who really want to go the route of, well, why don't we just have the government cover more of this, or cover the entirety of all prescription medicine, and really kind of keep moving the goalposts that way. But that 90% figure just sounds so staggering to me in terms of the possibility there. And it really just takes me back to a comment from a previous guest, Dr. Singer, who really made the argument that the FDA should really just focus on safety and some modest efficacy, and then outside of that should leave things to doctors and patients. And it sounds like this act would kind of move things in that direction. How hopeful are you that this moves forward and we actually do see some of this fundamental change?
I'm optimistic. I think with the COVID-19 and the fast access to vaccines, that the general public is more open to having this discussion. And the other thing is, we're really talking about common sense solutions. Here's an example: venture capital. Everyone says we want to fund the best scientific research with out-of-the-box solutions to the most serious diseases out there. Okay, now if I'm a venture capitalist and you come to me and you say, I've got the best scientists involved, and we have this out-of-the-box novel solution to an important disease, please give me some funding. The venture capitalist would say, you're asking me to wait 8 to 10 years before I can get a payback. And because it's such an out-of-the-box innovation, the FDA is going to have incredibly stringent phase 3 clinical trial milestones. I don't know if I want to give you any money. Now, Promising Pathway Act is passed, you go to a venture capitalist and you say, look, we've got the best scientific talent and we can produce a drug provisional approval in 36 months. We can demonstrate that it works. We'll be generating revenue. Would you like to fund that? Just think of how the favorable impact on venture capital. So the more you look at the economic logic involved, in particular, that if you want to, lower prices, okay, you want competition. You want a lot of companies, competing, and that's just fundamentally sound. And when politicians talk about, price controls and all this empty thinking, that you never hear them say, let's talk about return on investment, ROI. Business people live and die by that. But what determines your return on investment? You invest money, then how long does it take do you get money back, and how much money do you get back? So that with Promising Pathway Act passed, then drug developers can radically lower their prices and maintain the same ROI because they generate revenue sooner and their costs are perhaps 90% lower. That's another fundamental economic logic, return on investment, as a way of looking at the problem. How do you really get to a world of better drugs sooner at lower cost?
That's the man who brings you those ideas. Thank you so much, Bart. He's the author of Free to Choose Medicine, Better Drugs Sooner at Lower Cost. You can read his article over on fee.org. We'll go ahead and link to that. Bart, thanks so much for all of your work, and hope to speak to you again soon here on Consumer Choice Radio.
Great. Thank you for having me.
Cheers.